My sister got $500,000, I got $10,000 in the will. The lawyer revealed the real reason. The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, a man whose face had been a fixture in my life since childhood, cleared his throat. The sound, a dry rustle of paper and age, seemed to boom in the sterile, silent office. The air was thick with the scent of old leather, lemon polish, and something else: finality. It was a smell I'd always associated with my father's authority, with serious conversations behind closed doors. Now it just smelled like the closing of a book. Mr. Harrison's words, when they finally came, shot across the vast expanse of polished mahogany and hit me with the physical force of a car crash. To my eldest daughter, Amelia, I leave $500,000. Time seemed to warp, stretching and thinning like overheated plastic. I was frozen, my own breath caught in my lungs, a stone in my throat. My gaze slid unwillingly, magnetically toward my sister. I watched a triumphant, venomous smirk spread slowly, deliberately across her face. It wasn't a wide smile. It was something far more potent, a private joke she was sharing only with herself. She shot me a look, not of pity, not even of simple happiness, but of pure, unadulterated victory. It was a tiny, condescending tilt of her head that screamed everything she'd never had to say out loud. I win. You lose. As always. Then the lawyer turned to me. His eyes, magnified by thick glasses that made him look like a wise old owl, were full of a deep, sorrowful pity that I wouldn't begin to comprehend for another 24 hours. And to my youngest son I leave $10,000. Amelia didn't even try to hide it. She laughed. It wasn't a giggle or a chuckle. It was a short, sharp bark that was pure, distilled triumph. The sound bounced around the opulent room, ricocheting off the leather-bound books and glass awards before lodging itself deep in my chest like a shard of ice. 10 grand. $10,000. It was less than the cost of the oriental rug beneath my feet. After everything. After the last 2 years of my life which I had surrendered completely. The rest of the will became a meaningless drone in the background. Minor bequests to distant cousins I barely recognized and charities I'd barely heard of. My mind was no longer processing words, only a roaring inferno of betrayal and white-hot rage. I was seconds from leaping out of my chair, from screaming, from declaring my intent to contest this sham, this insult disguised as a will. But then Mr. Harrison, who had known me since I was a boy stealing sweets from his office candy dish, slid a single sealed manila envelope across the desk. It was thick, heavy, and it stopped right in front of me like a roadblock. He leaned forward, the old leather of his chair groaning in protest as if it too felt the weight of the moment. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, a low rumble meant only for my ears, cutting through the red haze of my anger. Now, he said, his gaze firm and unwavering, holding mine and refusing to let go. Let's talk about the real reason. The drive home was a silent war zone. My wife, Chloe, sat in the passenger seat, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap her knuckles were white. She kept shooting me worried glances that I pointedly refused to meet. I just stared ahead at the gray, wet ribbon of road, my own knuckles bone white on the steering wheel. The only sounds were the maddening thump-thump-thump of the windshield wipers against a light drizzle and Amelia's victorious laugh, playing on a torturous loop in my head. $10,000. It wasn't even a rounding error in my parents' multi-million-dollar estate. It was a joke. A deliberate, meticulously calculated slap in the face designed to humiliate me one final time. The second we walked through our front door, the dam of my restraint shattered. Can you believe her? I exploded, the words tearing out of my raw throat. I began pacing our small living room like a caged animal, the frantic motion feeling like the only thing keeping me from punching a hole straight through the drywall. Laughing. She actually laughed in my face. Right there, in front of everyone. Chloe, bless her heart, tried to be the voice of reason, to tether me to the ground before I floated away on a cloud of pure rage. Honey, slow down. Just breathe. I'm sure there has to be an explanation. There must be. Your parents loved you. You know they did. Did they? I shot back, spinning to face her, my arms spread wide with disbelief. The words tasted like acid. Does this feel like love to you, Chloe? Because to me this feels like a punishment. A final, posthumous declaration that I was and always will be second best. And I know exactly who orchestrated it. Amelia. It had to be. My mind raced back, a frantic, agonizing slideshow of the last 2 years. When Mom got sick, the diagnosis falling like a guillotine on our family, and then Dad's health started to crumble right after, I was the one who stepped up. I didn't just visit on weekends or call after work. I practically moved back into my childhood home. I put my entire career on hold, letting my projects and clients slip away one by one, becoming their full-time unpaid caregiver. I was their cook, spending hours trying to make bland, chemo-friendly meals taste like something other than cardboard. I was their chauffeur for the endless gauntlet of doctor's appointments, My life measured in the hours spent in sterile waiting rooms under flickering fluorescent lights. I was their late-night nurse, cleaning up messes I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy and waking to the slightest cough to check fevers at 3 a.m. I was their emotional punching bag, absorbing their fear, their frustration, their grief because they had no one else to give it to. I managed their dozens of medications, held my mom's frail, bird-like hand through every single chemo session, and listened to my dad's whispered fears in the dead of night when he thought she couldn't hear. I gave them 2 years of my life. My prime years. I thought that's what good sons did. I thought parents were supposed to reward the child who made the biggest sacrifice. And where was Amelia during this agonizing chapter? She lived 3 hours away, safely insulated from the daily grinding misery of sickness and decline. She culture. Those infuriatingly cheerful, breezy 5-minute calls where she'd ask, "So, how is everyone?" before immediately launching into a breathless story about her latest promotion, her fabulous weekend getaway to wine country, or a new Michelin-starred restaurant she'd tried. He sent money. A couple $100 a month, she'd proudly announce during her calls, as if that could possibly compare to the river of time, energy and sanity I was pouring into their care every single day. Even my aunt who was at the will reading took her side. "She was always the responsible one," she murmured to another cousin, just loud enough for me to hear as I was reeling. "So supportive." Supportive? She was an absentee daughter who threw pocket change at a problem she couldn't be bothered to actually face. This wasn't a new wound, it was the violent tearing open of an old one. This was the fundamental pattern of our entire lives, set in stone from the moment I was born. Amelia was the golden child, the firstborn, the prodigy who could do no wrong. She got the brand new cherry red convertible at 16 for getting straight A's. I inherited Dad's 10-year-old clunker with a sputtering engine, a driver's side door that didn't always open and a permanent lingering scent of old coffee and disappointment. Her Ivy League college was paid for in full, no questions asked, a blank check for her brilliant future. When my turn came, I was sat down at the kitchen table for a serious talk, and told to apply for every student loan I could find and get a part-time job, because money was suddenly tight. Funny how it was never tight for her that I spent my 20s in a desperate, frantic scramble to prove myself, clawing my way up the corporate ladder with a chip on my shoulder the size of a boulder. But in my parents' eyes, I was always the irresponsible one, the dreamer, the risk-taker. That perception was cemented into family lore when I was 23. Our grandmother, in her infinite wisdom, had left me $50,000. It was more money than I had ever seen, a ticket to a new life, I thought. I was young, I was dumb, and I was drunk on the intoxicating power of having real capital for the first time. I made some spectacularly bad investments in a buddy's guaranteed tech startup. Something about a revolutionary new app for rating public restrooms. I then blew the rest on a long hedonistic trip through Europe, trying to outrun the humiliation of my failure. Within a year it was all gone. Every last cent. It was a stupid, painful mistake, but my parents never, ever let me forget it. It became their go-to cautionary tale at family gatherings, a story trotted out to illustrate the folly of youth and my inherent recklessness, always ending with a sad shake of the head in my direction. Amelia, of course, was the perfect foil in this narrative. She was the picture of financial prudence. She saved her money, she made sensible investments in index funds, she bought a modest house in a good school district. She was everything they wanted me to be, and she never missed an opportunity to subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, remind them of my failures while highlighting her own successes. "Oh, that trip sounds fun," she'd say when I'd mention a vacation. "I'm just putting extra toward my mortgage this year. The power of compound interest, you know." So when my parents got sick, a part of me, a dark, selfish part, saw my chance. A chance to finally prove them wrong. A chance to show them who was truly dependable when things got real. I sacrificed those 2 years, believing my sweat equity would finally earn me the respect, the validation I'd been craving my whole life. I thought they finally saw me. I thought they were grateful. The will was supposed to be my vindication, the final, undeniable acknowledgement of my devotion. Instead, it was the final, brutal confirmation of my place in the family hierarchy. The second-rate son who deserved a pittance while the golden child walked away with a fortune. I told Chloe that night I was going to fight it. I was going to hire a lawyer and drag Amelia's name and my parents' judgment through the mud. There was no way this was what they really wanted. The next day I was back in Mr. Harrison's office, the scent of lemon polish and old paper now smelling like judgment. The sealed manila envelope sat on the desk between us, a silent, taunting presence. My anger from the day before had cooled into a cold, hard knot of resolve in my gut. I was ready for a fight. "Before you say anything about contesting the will," Mr. Harrison started gently, his voice calm and steady as he held up a hand. "Your parents anticipated this reaction. They asked me to give you this. They knew this would be hard for you to hear." He nodded toward the envelope. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up and broke the seal. Inside was not a legal document, but a multi-page letter in my mother's elegant, looping handwriting, now shaky and frail-looking. "My dearest son," it began. "If you are reading this, your father and I are gone and your heart is probably broken and angry. We know you. We know your passionate heart. Please do not let your anger speak for you. Let Mr. Harrison explain. We need you to understand that this isn't and has never been about loving your sister more. We love you both with everything we have, but we had to love you differently. Please just listen." I looked up at Mr. Harrison, my righteous anger suddenly faltering, replaced by a dizzying wave of confusion. He began to speak, and with every sentence the world I had constructed for myself, the entire narrative of my own victimhood, fell apart piece by piece. "For the past 10 years, he said, his tone gravely serious, "your sister has been secretly supporting your parents." He opened a thick folder filled with tabs and highlighted figures. "It started about a decade ago when your father's business almost went under. He was far too proud to ever tell you, but he was on the verge of bankruptcy. Amelia discovered the truth when she came home for Christmas and saw the letters. She took out a substantial personal loan without a word to anyone but me, and paid off over $100,000 in his business debts." He paused, letting that sink in. My mouth was dry. I couldn't speak. My father, my infallible, proud father, on the verge of bankruptcy? Impossible. "Then a few years ago, when your mother's first round of cancer treatments failed, her doctors suggested an experimental drug. Your insurance wouldn't cover it. The cost was over $200,000. He slid a sheaf of bank statements across the desk. Huge wire transfers month after month, from Amelia's account to a specialized pharmacy in another state. Amelia paid for every single dose. She made your parents and me swear not to tell you. She insisted on being anonymous because she said you had enough to worry about, and she didn't want you to feel a financial burden." He wasn't done. The quiet, methodical destruction of my reality continued. "The mortgage on their house. They fell behind years ago after your father's business troubles. Amelia's been paying it for the last 8 years to keep them from foreclosure. That came to over $150,000. He pointed to another stack of papers, another trail of money I knew nothing about. "She also paid for the wheelchair ramp you helped install, the stair lift that saved your dad's knees, the hospital bed for your mom, the in-home nursing visits on the weekends you needed a break. All the things that allowed you to care for them at home. Your sweat equity was only possible because your sister was quietly financing the entire operation from afar." My head was spinning, the room tilting on its axis. $500,000 isn't an inheritance for her," Mr. Harrison said softly, his voice full of the pity I now understood. "It's a reimbursement. And a partial one at that. Her actual contributions were significantly more. This was your parents' way of trying to make her whole again." Then came the final soul-crushing blow. "And the $10,000, he said, looking at me with those same sad, knowing eyes from yesterday. He slid one last document forward. It was a copy of the records from my grandmother's inheritance, showing the initial deposit and the rapid-fire withdrawals to zero. Your parents saw what happened with the $50,000 she left you. It scared them. They never stopped worrying about it. They worried that a large, sudden inheritance would be a temptation you couldn't handle. They saw it as a danger to you, not a gift. The $10,000. They felt it was an amount that could genuinely help you, a safety net, but not an amount that could hurt you. In their own way, they always saw you as the one who needed protection. Even from yourself." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was absolute, deafening, a vacuum that sucked all the air and anger out of the room. All my righteous indignation, my lifetime of perceived injustices, evaporated in an instant, replaced by a profound, hollow and suffocating shame that felt like drowning. Every memory from the last decade replayed in my mind, but now twisted into a new, sickening shape. Amelia's brief calls weren't breezy. They were efficient, stolen moments in a demanding career that was funding our family's survival. Her talk of promotions wasn't bragging. It was a veiled explanation for where all this impossible money was coming from. She wasn't an absentee daughter. She was a silent benefactor, the load-bearing pillar holding our entire family up from 3 hours away. And she never said a word. She allowed me to believe I was the hero, to have my moment of filial glory, all to protect my pride and our parents' dignity. She let me play the martyr while she was quietly paying for the very stage I was standing on. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. My angry threats of a lawsuit now seemed not just foolish but monstrous. When the truth inevitably trickled out to the wider family, the relatives who had offered me their sympathy now looked at me with a mixture of contempt and pity. They rallied around Amelia, their quiet, unsung hero. My aunt called me, her voice cold as ice, and told me she had never been so disappointed in anyone in her life. The stress and the crushing weight of my own shame were too much for my marriage. Chloe tried to help, but I was unreachable, lost in a self-hating fog. We separated a few months later after a final painful conversation where she told me, "The man I married would never have been so blind. You let your ego write a story that wasn't true, and now you can't even look at yourself in the mirror. I can't live with that ghost." He was right. I haven't spoken to Amelia. How could I? What words exist to bridge a chasm that deep? "I'm sorry" feels pathetically inadequate. "Thank you" feels like an insult. The story of my great sacrifice was a lie I had told myself so convincingly that I believed it more than anyone. The real story was one of her quiet, relentless, and unpraised love. My parents didn't love her more. They trusted her more. They saw me, even as a grown man pushing 40, as the reckless boy who squandered his inheritance on a pipe dream and a European vacation. They saw her as the woman who quietly saved their entire world. And in the end they were right about us both. The $10,000 sits in a savings account untouched. It has earned a few dollars in interest. It's no longer an insult. It's a constant, glaring reminder. A reminder that the truth can be a far heavier inheritance than money, and that sometimes, the poorest person in the room is the one who is blind to the riches they've been given all along. If you have watched this far, hit that subscribe button, like and share. Tell us what time it is where you are and where you are watching from.